Okay, we are live now. We can get started. Let's start with the prayers.
Yogena chittasya padena vacham malam sharirasya cha vaidyakena yopakarot tam pravaram muninam patanjalim pranjaliranatosmi.
Excellent. So welcome back. And we are about to start the second chapter of Patanjali Yoga Darshana. So today we will see two verses or two sutras of chapter 2. But before that, we wanted to ground ourselves where exactly the chapter 2 starts, what exactly is the structure of chapter 2, and what is the importance of chapter 2, and where the chapter 2 fits with the overall scheme of things. So if you remember, we had the first section we covered in our Yoga Sutra session was an introduction to Yoga Sutra. I believe we had 5 sessions. There we talked about the darshanas, the spiritual darshanas or the Shad darshanas of the Vedic system. So the Indian spiritual tradition is broadly classified into 2 categories. One is Astika, the other one is Nastika. Very interestingly, Astika is not that which believes in God, but that accepts Vedas as the ultimate authority of the scripture. And out of that, there were 6 schools, Mimamsa, Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Yoga, Vedanta, and Sankhya. So these are the 6, in fact, Vedanta at the end, Sankhya, Yoga, and Vedanta. So these are the 6 schools. So yoga is one of the 6 schools of the Indian Vedic spiritual tradition. And the goal of the yoga is mainly it is the experiential aspect of the spirituality. We saw the 2 meanings of the word yoga. One is any practices or the state which is a stable, pure, calm, absorbed mental state, samadhi. And then the second state is the samadhi itself is not just a binary state, but it is a continuum. Starts with a pure, stable, controlled state, but ends up in a state where the mind is completely absorbed in Purusha or the real self in you, the consciousness in you. So Patanjali Yoga Sutra is a book, probably the most authoritative book, which systematized this teaching on the darshana of yoga. So we saw that. Maharshi Patanjali did that, and he compiled or systematized this darshana, which is the original vision of the Vedas, and which is the way Patanjali saw the Vedic vision. He compiled into this yoga darshana in the form of 195 sutras. These sutra means it's a special kind of literature. If you remember, we had a long discussion about the different categories of literature in our Sanatana Dharma or in our Vedic tradition. Starting with the Vedas as the ultimate authority. Vedas has 3 or 4 categories or sections. You have the mantra section, you have the Brahmana section, you have the Aranyaka section, and you have the Upanishad section. So Upanishads is part of the Vedas, and this teaching, so the karma, mantra mean the mantra, Upas, the Aranyaka and Brahmana section is known as Karma Kanda of the Veda, which talks about the various ritualistic worship of the god. And then the last portion, which is mainly the Upanishads, talks about the self-knowledge. So Vedas are our ultimate scripture. And please note that Upanishad is not separate from Veda. Upanishad is always part of the Veda. So that's category number 1. And the category number 2 literature is called Sutra. Sutra is a special kind of literature where you try to represent a larger idea in a smaller set of words. It's like an equation. So E equal to MC square, F equal to MA, just like that. A larger vision is encapsulated into a few letters. And there are a few rules we need to follow. We talked about that in extensively. Padma Purana defines what is the characteristics of a sutra. Alpaksharam, Asannektham, Saravat Vishwatomukham, Alphokam, Anavadyokam, Sutram Sutra Vido Viduhu. It should be unambiguous. It should be crystal clear. It should have a universal outlook. You cannot just define it for one set of people. It should cover the entire humanity, not just the entire humanity, the entire world, entire universe. So Patanjali Yoga Sutra is compiled in that particular fashion. And this is authored by sage Patanjali. We talked about a little bit about Patanjali himself. He is a great sage, a great devotee of Lord Shiva, believed to have born in Trincomalee, Sri Lanka, moved to Chidambaram in Chennai, where he composed all these Yoga Sutra. He is known for his three major work. One is a book on grammar, which is known as Mahabhashya, a book on Ayurveda, which we lost completely. We know that he wrote it, but we don't have the actual book. And finally, we have the Yoga Sutra. And that is why his prayer always talks about this Muni, Patanjali, this sage, blessed us in three forms. Through yoga, he helped us to clean our mind. With Ayurveda, he helped us to clean our body. And with grammar, he helped us to purify our speech. So to that sage, I salute. And Patanjali, in his Yoga Darshana, the book's name is called Yoga Darshana. It is popularly known as Yoga Sutra because it is written in the Sutra literature form. So that is the reason. And Yoga Sutra has 4 major chapters. Each chapter is known as a pada. The first chapter was Samadhipada. The second chapter known as Sadhanapada. The third chapter is known as Vibhudipada. And the fourth chapter is known as Kaivalyapada. So these are the 4 different chapters of Yoga Sutra. And we covered 51 sutras of the first chapter. First chapter was mainly talking about only one topic, which is Samadhi. The different stages of the Samadhi and how one can move from one stage of the Samadhi to the other side. So we were told what, how was mentioned, but not to that extent. We just heard the what we need to do to get the Samadhi. What are all the different states of the Samadhi? Now it's a very important. Looks great. Samadhi, if you think about Samadhi, Samadhi can be broadly categorized into 2 stages, Samprajnada and Asamprajnada. And within Samprajnada, you have another 6 categories. Savitarka, Nirvitarka, Savichara, Nirvichara, Ananda, Asmita. All these are the different stages of the Samprajnada Samadhi. And finally, you move to the Asamprajnada Samadhi or the Nirbija Samadhi, where you purely identify with the self. So this much we saw, and we saw that, okay, you need to do something. And verse 11 highlighted it, and verse 30 to 34, just a little bit elaboration is given. The verse 11 clearly said what you need to do to reach that state. Simply reading this book will not give you that experiential Samadhi. It will give you only a theoretical Samadhi. You can talk about Savitarka, Savichara, everything beautifully, but that's not what is your experiences. So what is going to reduce that gap between what is told in the scripture versus what is my experience? You need to do something. And we were told clearly, you need to do something. Abhyasa Vairagya. It's only said you have to practice. If somebody say you have to take a medicine and without telling, means you have a disease, you go to a doctor. The doctor said, yes, you have a disease. You have to take a medicine. But without giving a detailed prescription on what to take, how to take, when to take, what are all things you need to follow, that won't benefit. Yes, you may have a theoretical understanding that this and whatever practice prescribed should be easily followed by you. At least the beginning stages, you need to follow step by step, you need to proceed. So whatever you highlighted in the chapter 1, you need to have a detailed set of instruction, practices. You need to understand the tools and techniques, how I can experience that stage. So the second chapter is devoted for that. And that is why it is known as Sadhanapada. So the meaning of the Sadhanapada is this is a chapter focusing on sadhana. What exactly I need to do? What are all the prescribed practices to be followed? Is it mere asana? Because if you really look at the modern world yoga, when people say that I'm going and doing yoga, they say that they're just meaning the yoga at the mat. Is that what Patanjali meant? So if that is the case, if 30 minutes of Hatha Yoga is going to make somebody to Kaivalya, why most of the people have stress and anxiety even after doing this? It helps you to control, but why are you not reaping the benefits highlighted in chapter 1? So what are all the sadhanas? How can I do the sadhanas? What tools and techniques I need to follow? That is the subject of this chapter. And that is why this chapter is known as Sadhanapada. So this, very interestingly, this chapter on a very high level, whenever you think about Patanjali Yoga, if anybody talks about Patanjali Yoga, what comes to everybody's mind? Ashtanga Yoga. Even the person who do not know anything about the Patanjali Yoga, they will say Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranama. Because every yoga studio has a infographics. Everybody talks about that. Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama. They talk about that randomly. So what exactly is this Ashtanga Yoga? So that is introduced in this chapter. But a lot of people think that the entire Ashtanga Yoga introduced in this chapter. No, only 5 steps out of the 8 steps introduced in this chapter. So please note that. Only 5 out of 8 steps of Ashtanga Yoga is introduced. So this chapter, you can say that there are 2 broad content sadhana. One is the first 5 steps of the Ashtanga Yoga. And second thing is, a lot of the traditional yoga practitioners undermine another practice, which is pretty much needed, which is known as Kriya Yoga. So this chapter mainly covers 2 topics. One is Kriya Yoga, and the other one is the first 5 steps of the Ashtanga Yoga. This is the scope of the Sadhanapada. So this is what we are going to cover. So we need to understand what is Kriya Yoga. Can I skip the Kriya Yoga and go to Ashtanga Yoga directly? No, you have to do Kriya Yoga also. Patanjali is going to tell that. So we need to understand that. So Kriya Yoga, first 5 steps of the Ashtanga Yoga. That's what we are going to cover. The rest 3 steps of the Ashtanga Yoga will be covered in the next chapter, which is the Vibhudipada. So just to give you a fast forward, Vibhudipada, the chapter name is known as, because ideally, if somebody should have I don't know why it is done. I would have thought that the whole Ashtanga Yoga would have part of the chapter 2, and then Vibhudipada just focus upon the benefits or the glory of this Ashtanga Yoga. But it is organized in such a way that the Vibhudipada starts with these 3 pending steps of Ashtanga Yoga: Dharana, Dhyana, Samadhi, which will be covered in the Vibhudipada, and then it talks about the glory or the merits of the Ashtanga Yoga. And finally, the last chapter is known as Kaivalyapada, which only talks about the highest phase of the Samadhi, which is Kaivalya. Kaivalya, we talked about that, right? Nirvij Samadhi, Asamprajnata Samadhi, where you are directly experiencing the Purusha and nothing but Purusha. Kevalasya Bhava, Kaivalya. In the Vedantic language, it is known as Moksha or Mukti. That is the stage we are talking. And this is the overall structure. So let's quickly understand the 10 topics covered in this chapter. The first 2 verses defines Kriya Yoga. So this is a sadhana for removing the mental impurities, mala nivritti. That is very important. So the mental impurity, mental cleansing is very important. Remember, you wanted to, what is your goal? You wanted to experience the Purusha. And what is the tools you need to use to know yourself and understand yourself? Of course, initially it is your mind. So why your mind is not able to see what is there? Because just like Bhagavad Gita tells, Yoga, Patanjali Yoga Sutra also tells, there are two major obstacles. One is your mind may have coloring or the impurities. Second thing is that your mind is not stable because of the chitta vrittis. So you need to have specific sadhanas or practices which would give a clean mind, a pure mind, a mind that is not controlled by the colorings. So you need a practice for that. And after that, you need to have a practice which is to stabilize my mind, because the chitta vrittis needs to be identified. It has to be controlled. It has to be finally quietened completely. So this two steps, one is known as Kriya Yoga and the other one is Ashtanga Yoga. These two are the practices, sadhanas. The goal of the Kriya Yoga is mainly on the physical, on the gross front or the up front. If your mind has a lot of impurities in your mind, you need to have a process to clean the mind. Those who studied Bhagavad Gita, this is very obvious. Bhagavad Gita has Karma Yoga. This is exactly what it is. When we study, you will understand. This Kriya Yoga is pretty much similar to Karma Yoga. And then Bhagavad Gita talks about another thing called Upasana Yoga, which is actually the meditation, the path of meditation, prayer, everything. That comes a loose connect. I mean, if you connect loosely the sadhanas prescribed by Bhagavad Gita and Patanjali Yoga Sutra, Kriya Yoga is pretty much connected with the Karma Yoga of the Bhagavad Gita. And the Upasana Yoga of the Bhagavad Gita is pretty much connected with the Ashtanga Yoga here. So the thing is, Ashtanga Yoga has Yama and Niyama, which is again for purifying the mind. So it's not just one-to-one, but predominantly, you have to understand this. Predominantly, the Kriya Yoga also helps you to control the mind also, but predominantly it focuses on the purification of the mind. And the Ashtanga Yoga is predominantly focuses on the controlling of the mind. One without the other will not be very effective. Very important. So when you understand the sadhana given by the two great books of yoga, one is Bhagavad Gita and one is actually Patanjali Yoga Sutra. Bhagavad Gita path is Karma Yoga, Upasana Yoga, followed by Jnana Yoga. Patanjali Yoga Sutra is again Karma Yoga, the Kriya Yoga, Ashtanga Yoga, because the knowledge part is covered under the Ashtanga Yoga, because it takes you to the Asamprajnata Samadhi. So pretty much there is not much difference in the actual path, even though it names differently, and sadhanas are slightly here and there, like sequencing may be a little bit different here and there, but 95% both are same. The reason why I'm highlighting is I read a very interesting article very recent time. A scholar tried to publish an article. He said the yoga is completely contradictory in different books. Bhagavad Gita tell you to follow Karma Yoga, Upasana Yoga, Jnana Yoga. Here it tells to follow Kriya Yoga and Ashtanga Yoga. How can this be reconciled? Can you believe this? If the scholar had done a little bit study of these two, I don't know how they can miss these type of obvious things. So please be careful. Whenever we read article, whenever we read certain books, they're writing without any reference. They're writing without any research. They're writing without any understanding. This is the pathetic situation of our culture. Just to get a paper published. The problem is, I was talking to some good scholars. They said the person who is reviewing the paper also don't know. So this is the pathetic situations in the scriptural literature we have. There is absolutely no difference. The path is the same. You will see that a little bit later when you get into the Kriya Yoga, because we studied Karma Yoga enough to understand Karma Yoga. So that's just an introduction. So when you go to Kriya Yoga, that it starts with Kriya Yoga. What is Kriya Yoga? Brilliantly defined. The commentary makes it very obvious and very clear. And then you have how to minimize these mental impurities, because Patanjali also tells without minimizing, without clearing these mental impurities, you cannot go to subtle sadhanas. A lot of people wonder why I'm not able to sit and do the meditation. If you're struggling to do your 1 minute meditation, definitely you should focus more on Kriya Yoga or Karma Yoga. This is the problem. So a lot of people, they want to meditate, but they come to meditate and they say that I cannot do the meditation. They go back. This is the reason. So if you do Karma Yoga, if you do the Kriya Yoga, let me use the terminologies very correctly. If you use the Kriya Yoga, the benefit is it will minimize the mental impurities. And per the yoga vision, if I follow the yogic language, Patanjali tells it will improve your subtle sattva. It increases the sattva of your mind. So you'll have more clarity. Your meditation will be more fruitful. Your subtle sadhanas becomes very effective. So if you find it difficult to practice the subtle sadhana, you have to go to the gross or the physical sadhana. Means the gross is an Indian word, but it has a totally different meaning here. So the physical sadhana. So physical sadhana you have to practice. So how to handle these subtle thoughts? There are a few verses. And one of the biggest challenges, the karma, the bondage of the karma. The bondage of the karma is so powerful. When we think about the bondage of the karma, don't think that this is superstition. We all experience the bondage of karma. The bondage of karma is in our experience, in our day-to-day experience. We all come with certain likes and dislikes. We know that our thoughts flows in certain direction. This is what is karma. Don't think that karma is something pretty much which is not visible to me, which is somebody sitting in heaven and doing it. And the effect of the karma, you can even experience in this life. If you do something very much repeatedly, it forms as a habit, and then that habit is going to control you. So karma means that collective, the collective habit, which is generated from birth to birth to birth, and which was accumulated or fructified as your prarabdha. So karma's influences are pretty much there in our life. And this Kriya Yoga is a means to neutralize that karma. And it is a means to go beyond the bondage of karma. How do you work in such a way that, you are not under the grips of the karma? Karmas would be there. The likes and dislikes will be there. But how can I act without getting pushed and pulled by the likes and dislikes? Yes, that pull will be there, but I will have control. Isn't it sounds similar to Karma Yoga? This is exactly what is Karma Yoga. So how to break the influence of karma, and how do you improve your discernments? Viveka. So this is another topic. And finally, from verse 28, the Ashtanga Yoga, the famous Ashtanga Yoga is introduced. Yamas and Niyamas will be introduced from on verse 30 to 45. Look at the number of sutras Patanjali is spending on Yama and Niyama. 15 sutras are dedicated to explain what is Yama and Niyama. But that you can understand how much importance he is giving on Yama and Niyama. Compared to that, how much sutras are dedicated for asanas? 46 to 48. Hardly 3 sutras. That's it. So 1/5 of Yamas Niyamas is dedicated to asana. So this is very important. Then pranayama is introduced in another 2 verses. That's it. The details are not given. He is saying that only you need to do the pranayama. And finally, pratyahara is introduced in another 2 verses. So if you think about in the modern yoga practices, 80 to 95% of the time you may do asana and pranayama. That is pretty much mentioned in the Yoga Sutra, but more emphasis is given. That doesn't mean that it is not important. It is equally important. But the problem is a lot of people misses Yama and Niyama and Kriya Yoga. When you miss Yama and Niyama and Kriya Yoga, you will not get the expected results. So that's what the summary of this chapter. So once again, this chapter focuses on sadhana. And this sadhana is what we need. And if you want to start your spiritual practices, this is where you need to start. And we got 10 topics in this chapter. That's it. So let me pause here. Any questions on the introduction?
Yeah, Rajesh.
Yes, Yogi.
Whatever happened to sutras 51 to 53?
Oh,
Uh,
okay. So it is again pratyahara. It's my bad. I forgot. Means I didn't represent it properly. So it is the same topic.
Okay.
I'll update that. Good catch. Okay. So let's listen to these first two verses, and then we will go to the each verses.
द्वितीय साधनपादः तप स्वाध्यायेश्वर प्रणिधानानि
Can you hear?
क्रियायोगः समाधिभावनार्थः क्लेशतनूकरणार्थश्च.
Sorry. Did you hear?
You can hear Rajesh. Yeah.
Okay, sure. I had a little bit of audio issues. Okay, so that's good. So let's go to the actual sutra. Okay.
तप स्वाध्यायेश्वर प्रणिधानानि क्रियायोगः.
Brilliant definition of Kriya Yoga. He said, Tapaha Swadhyayaha Ishvara Pranidhanaha Kriya Yogaha. Kriya Yoga consists of 3 steps, 3 action. One is tapas, second one is swadhyaya, third one is Ishvara Pranidhana. The commentators defines this brilliantly. Kriya means what? Action. Yoga of action. This yoga of action consists of, Kriya means that which you do with a karana is Kriya. That's it. So you have karta, karmaha, kriya. There are different things. So what you do is kriya. So the Kriya Yoga consists of 3 things. One is tapas. Vyasa. Tapas means, when I say tapas, what comes to everybody's mind? Somebody hanging down a tree or staying in one leg. That's not tapas. Tapa literally means that which generates heat. So if you go back to the literature, Vyasa says discipline. Certain discipline you put so that your practices are fruitful. Right? Suppose I want to write a test. Let's say that I'm writing, say, PMP test. Don't I have to put some discipline? Let's say that I book the test for in April or May. I have 45 days. So my current lifestyle, when I come back home, what I do? I go and watch movies, I eat and sleep. If I continue that lifestyle, will that going to help me to clear the test? No. I have to put some discipline. I have to make sure that I'm cutting down some of certain things. I'm making sure that I'm dedicating myself for something. So that skill, putting certain discipline to achieve a goal is known as tapas. This is what you see in the Puranas also. Ravana doing tapas. Ravana had a goal. What? If you borrow the Puranic language, his goal was to gain some boon from Brahma. Trishanku had a boon, tapas. Trishanku's goal was what? He wanted to go to heaven. So for that, what he did? He cut himself from the worldly affairs and put certain discipline. So what is that discipline? He went to a forest. He did these things for achieving certain things. Now, you need to understand, anybody doing tapas, is that good? Hitler also did tapas. Stalin also did tapas. Depending upon the goal, the tapas becomes good, swatik, rajasic, or tamasic. So just because somebody is doing tapas, that doesn't mean that they are doing the right thing. So when Shabari did the tapas, it was for a noble goal, swatik goal. And that needs to be accepted and appreciated. It doesn't matter which varna he was born into. Absolutely no problem. But when Ravana did the tapas, that tapas is not for the benefit of the humanity. It is to disturb the humanity. So that's very important. So here, that's a side topic which we'll talk in the Gita class. But tapas here means you are putting some effort. What is your goal? You want to gain a pure mind. So for that purpose, whatever discipline I put is known as tapas. Vyasa's commentary, he gives, you have to control, put discipline your sense organs. The first thing he highlights is what? What you eat. How much you eat, the quality, the quantity, and the timing of what you eat is very important. Those who do the dieting, is Arnab there? He is the one who always talks about the intermittent fasting. That's a tapas. Right? What is the goal there? To gain health, to improve my health or weight loss, that is a tapas. When you diet, that is a tapas. When you avoid sugar, that is a tapas. So first level of tapas is body level tapas. So the body level tapas is, I want to control 5 sense organs. What I eat, what I see. I prefer to see what I see. So should I engage in watching a third-rate show, or should I engage my eyes in seeing something else? What I hear, what I touch, what I smell, put disciplines. Don't, means nobody is saying that don't live in the world and enjoy things, but usually our mind will carry us away from what I'm eating, what I want to see, what I want to listen. What means, do I want to listen gossips, or do I want to listen to something else? It's all our choice. There's no problem in running around the world, but be disciplined and run around the world. If I don't put that discipline into my life, right from the eating to the exercise to what I see, what I indulge, mind will not be purified. So number 1 discipline is tapas, that is at the body level. Second level of tapas is at the speech level. So Bhagavad Gita also gives brilliantly these things, right? So this one, the body level tapas is yuktahara viharasya yukta teshtasya karmasu yukta sopnavabodhasya yogo bhavati dukkha. This is how Bhagavad Gita defines the discipline. Appropriate quality, appropriate quantity, appropriate timing for food. Appropriate level of activity, not too much, not too less. Appropriate level of recreation, not too much, not too less. Appropriate level of sleep, not too much, not too less. This is the discipline. This is important. So this is the body level discipline. What is that? The mind level discipline. Sorry, the second level of discipline. The second level of discipline is at the speech level. Anudvekakaram vakyam satyam priyahitam. This is Bhagavad Gita chapter 17. We will see this later. Don't use your mouth to abuse anybody. Even if you need to say something, say that gently, and you can be angry, but have a control on what you say, what you speak. If you consciously decide to speak something tough, I'm not saying that you should not say, you should be, say yes to everybody. That doesn't matter. No, that's not what we are saying. Have the control. But what happens is when you get into an argument, more than body, the mouth, the speech loses control. The third level of discipline, tapas, is at the mental level, which we will see with the meditation. So that's a topic in the later. But here, specifically what is called out in the Kriya Yoga is the discipline at the speech level and the body level. This is very important. So this is something that I can practice right now. And I don't need to have Kaivalya or Samprajnata Samadhi to do these things. Just have an observation on what disciplines I need to do. Whether it is intermittent fasting, whether it is your workout, whether it is your ability to do your Hatha Yoga every day. So without this discipline, you cannot even do the yoga. See, the Sunday is yoga class. Means if you have that discipline, you will prioritize that. If you have that discipline, you will follow the intermittent fasting. If you have that discipline, it will come slowly. Don't think that it will come quickly, but this is something that we need to start. So Saptapas. Second thing is known as Swadhyaya. Swadhyaya means Swayam Adhyaya. I'm studying by myself. It's not listening to this class. I need to spend some time myself, contemplating upon what am I studying, because otherwise what is going to happen? It will not click in you. So Swadhyaya has a larger context of meaning. It can include studying myself. So that's very important. When I put tapas, I need to have a monitoring and controlling mechanism. So I need to observe myself and try to track. That's where these tools comes in, right? Noom or MyFitnessPal, all those things you can use to understand yourself. If you take your weight every day, that's another way of understanding yourself. That is at the broader level. But the specific level, what is called out by Patanjali and Vyasa is, you need to understand what you are doing. When you say Ashtanga Yoga, you need to understand what it is. When you say Kriya Yoga, you need to understand what it is. So for that, your self-study. So every day, if not, at least a few days a week. How many verses we are covering a week? 1 or 2 or 3 verses. 3 verses of Yoga Sutra, 3 verses of Bhagavad Gita. If we can study that much, that itself can be fantastic. So self-study is very important because the scriptures gives you the whys and the details, everything. And when you study the scripture with a teacher, without your self-effort, the scriptural knowledge will not go into your head. So Swadhyaya is very important. Ishvara Pranidhana. This term was introduced even in Sadhanapada. Samadhipada. But here we have a little bit of different meaning, very specific meaning. You will be amazed. Patanjali or Vyasa tells something. He clearly tells, here Ishvara Pranidhana means the 2 type of attitude you develop. One attitude is Ishvara Arpana Buddhi. And the second attitude is Prasada Buddhi. Have you heard these terms anywhere? It is Karma Yoga. So you offer all your actions in front of Ishvara. Who is that Ishvara? All the commentators spent a couple of pages writing what is that Ishvara. It is not a deity sitting above the clouds and blessing you, just like the same discussions we have in the Bhagavad Gita. It is the intelligent order of the universe. Recognize that intelligent order of the universe and be sensitive to that intelligent order of the universe and align your actions with that intelligent order of the universe. So 2 things are specified in the commentary. One is offer all your actions as Ishvara's. And second thing is, whenever you get a result, take it as a prasad. So when you combine these 3, you put a discipline. Second thing is that you do the scriptural study. And third one is you do this Ishvara Arpana Buddhi, Prasada Buddhi. That is called Kriya Yoga. In my mind, this is exactly Karma Yoga. There is no difference. This is, if these three things put together, it becomes Karma Yoga. So you can see the reconciliation. And now you can understand when somebody write and try to publish an article, say that these names, these two are different because one is called Kriya Yoga, the other one is called Karma Yoga. It's so, you can, I don't know, cry or to laugh. This is that bad. So this is the first portion. Let's go to the slide. So this Kriya Yoga is a preparation for the Ashtanga Yoga. It produces the required purity of the mind. It's very closer to the Karma Yoga practices of the Bhagavad Gita. And it talks about three things: tapas, swadhyaya, and Ishvara pranidhana. This is what it is. At the end, I will show you a statement from one of the greatest coach of the modern world. You will understand the significance of this this unattached work. So I'll wait at the end during the Q&A, but this is a Kriya Yoga. So let's go to the next topic. Again, Kriya Yoga.
Samadhi bhavanardhah kleshatanu karanardhascha.
Samadhi bhavana artha. Why I need to do Kriya Yoga? He tells this Kriya Yoga, artha means goal. Here, look at the Sanskrit. The Sanskrit has different context-sensitive meaning. Here, the word artha means goal. The goal of this Kriya Yoga is Samadhi Bhavana. It eventually leads you to the Samadhi. But how? That is said in the second line. It tells Klesha. So Klesha means it is the obstacles. By removing Tanukarana. Tanukarana means by removing the obstacles towards Samadhi. Very simple. So Karma Yoga is not directly going to give you the Samadhi, but it removes the obstacle for you to pursue the Samadhi. Look at the language of Bhagavad Gita. Karma Yoga is not going to give you the moksha, but what is the language of Bhagavad Gita? It tells, it gives you the Antakarana Shuddhi, which is a need for pursuing the higher spiritual practice. Exactly the same thing. So Samadhi Bhavana Artha. This, for the goal is Samadhi Bhavana. And how Karma Yoga or the Kriya Yoga helps me is by removing the afflictions or weakening the afflictions or by weakening the obstacles of the mind. This is very clear. In second sutra, he tells it why I'm following the Samadhi, the Kriya Yoga. Very important. So let's try to see that. So klesha, this word is derived from the root klesh, means it is trouble, it causes pain or affliction, etc. But mainly in the path of yoga, it is used as something. It tells like that it is the obstacles. Obstacles means what? When I go to the higher, the subtle practices, what is that? Dharana, Dhyana, Samadhi. When I go to that subtle practices, that's where I'm finding it difficult. I cannot fix my mind. I want to meditate, but the mind will not stay. The mind will go away. All the other thoughts will come. And I cannot do the sadhanas. Why? When I say I cannot fix my mind, what does that internally mean? Think through the whole thing. The composition of the mind, if the mind is like a lake, the content of the lake is the water. So what you have stored in your mind, that represents the water. And the waves of that lake represents the vrittis, right? So imagine if the content is dark, that's a problem. And if the content is shaky, I cannot see the bottom of the lake. So you need to make sure that this kleshas represents that muddy, turbulent content of the lake. So when in the yoga language, when the content of the mind is colored, it tells it is not sattva. So remember, for the yoga terminology, for the Sankhya terminology, the word varna comes because these gunas are attributed with a particular color. Sattva represents the crystal clear, clarity, no color, white or whatever I cannot say that it is white. Symbolically, it is represented as white, but it is the natural color, the pure water's color. Tamas represents dark and Rajas represents red. So if you reduce your darkness and redness, you need a sadhana. So when you say removing klesha means you're purifying the mind, you're containing the flow of the mind. So this sadhana, the Kriya Yoga, is pretty much important for the subtle sadhana. So if any one of us feel that I am, in spite of my best effort, I'm not able to continue my meditative practices, you should focus more on Karma Yoga. So that's very important. And this will remove the obstacles, and these kleshas are weakened, or these impurities are weakened through the practice of Kriya Yoga, so that I can pick up the Ashtanga Yoga properly. So this is very important. So that means, see, Edwin Brand brilliantly tells, he always uses the word yoga beyond mat. He always uses that expression throughout his book. He tells, this is another example which tells you very clearly that the yoga is much beyond the mat. Unfortunately, the yoga studios just focuses on the mat, which will yield a limited benefit, which is the physical health. But it's like you are using a tool with its 10% capacity. That's it. As one of the teachers says, right? If he just uses the iPhone for making phone calls only. A lot of parents does that. So what is the value of that? So this amazing practice, which can be used for reaching the higher stages, it's pretty much used in a limited stage. So that's why the Kriya Yoga practiced. So we covered two topics today. One is we had a good introduction of what is Sadhanapada. Sadhanapada gives out the practices, the tools and techniques for the actual yoga. And then once means how it is organized. There are two topics covered. One is on a high level, two topics, and there are 10 sections of the topic. One is called Kriya Yoga. The other one is called Ashtanga Yoga, 5 steps. Portion of the Ashtanga Yoga is covered, I would say like that. And this Kriya Yoga is very important because without the Kriya Yoga, sometimes the Ashtanga Yoga may not be that much beneficial. So you need to do that. And we saw that Kriya Yoga is pretty much aligned, closely mapped to means you cannot say that it is one-to-one mapping, but pretty much very loosely mapped to the Karma Yoga of the Bhagavad Gita. And the Ashtanga Yoga is loosely mapped to the Upasana Yoga of the Bhagavad Gita. And what is Kriya Yoga? Tapas, which is the discipline at the physical level and the discipline at the speech level. And then Swadhyaya, which is the study of the scriptures. And then Ishvara Pranidhana, which is Ishwararpana Prasada Buddhi, which is particularly called out by Vyasa, the commentator, which clearly tells that this is referring to the Karma Yoga. And why do we practice this Kriya Yoga is it removes the obstacles in reaching the Samadhi. Very important. It is not for taking you to Samadhi, but it is for removing the obstacles that put a block for you to proceed towards Samadhi, exactly like the Karma Yoga. So we'll go to the second section next week. Let's listen to the prayer and then we can do the Q&A.
निर्विचार वैशारद्ये ॐ इति पतञ्जलि विरचिते योग
Sorry, we had some challenges. Okay, so that's fine. Means we can do the Q&A. So let's go to the Q&A. So any particular topic, anything you didn't understood, or anything you want to clarify, or any additional comments?
Yeah, Rajesh.
Yes, Rohit.
Kriya Yoga is almost the same as the last three part of the niyama, yama niyama.
Yeah, correct.
Is there any significance to that?
No, actually it is common. So that's why I was telling, like, there is a little bit of overlap, but Kriya Yoga is pretty much part of the niyama. It's redundant. Commentators also call that out. But Patanjali wanted to highlight this very specifically to show the importance of this, because without this, it will not be very, very beneficial. So he really wanted people to follow this, and that is why it is called out separately. Yes, this is part of the niyama.
Thanks.
Rajesh, one just clarification. So whatever the tapas we talked about today it's the same, similar to the one Chitta Stuti and Chitta Vritti, right? That is.
No. Yeah, the tapas is the discipline. So the discipline is you control your physical senses and you're controlling your speech. So how do you control the physical senses? How much you see, what do you see, what do you smell, what do you touch, what do you hear, what do you taste? Mainly the food, right? So that's why the definition of the Bhagavad Gita is very important. When you pursue a higher goal, you may want to make sure that you're putting some discipline. Without that discipline, your sadhanas will not yield the result. So control your eating, control your activity, control your sleep, control your recreation. Not when you say control, don't think that you're eliminating it. He said not too much, not too less. Appropriate. That's very important. And speech also, make sure that you're controlling, like putting some discipline. Some people, right, they say something and next day you get an email, sorry. What's the point in that?
I think it is about doing it consciously, right?
Yeah, mindfulness. Absolutely. This is very important. Otherwise, what is the difference between an animal and a human being? The animal, whatever it feels, it just does without putting a break between the thought and the action. But human beings have a wonderful capacity to put always a break between the speech or the thought and the action. And that's very important.
Yeah, I think it is like the difference between the reaction and the response that we discussed later, right?
Yeah, exactly. The same thing. It is the reaction and the response. So discipline and also following certain things, right? So you don't follow certain things and you follow certain things. When you say I follow intermittent fasting, I follow it. When I follow a healthy diet, I follow it. So tapas doesn't mean that I'm stopping something, but I'm doing something. That's why I would like to use the word discipline. Suppose you want to go to Mount Kailash, you have to put some discipline, right? You have to start climbing people go to Bear Mountain or some places and they try to climb. That's a discipline. So any goal you put, any results you want to achieve, that's why I said, like, suppose I'm writing a test, I need to put some discipline. Kids, when they prepare for SAT or SET, don't they have to put some discipline? That discipline, what is that discipline which is going to help me in the path of yoga, comes under the tapas. So it's a broad term.
Thank you.
Rajesh, I have a question on a Kriya Yoga. So many organizations right now are kind of bringing different Kriya Yogas, for example, Sudarshana Kriya, the Sambhavik Kriya, Isha Kriya, and all those in my mind now with this definition comes under Upasana Yoga. For example, Sudarshana Yoga is a pranayama. So rather than actually the Kriya Yoga that potentially it's mentioning, right?
That's good. Yeah, that's a good question. So a lot of organizations starting from Paramahamsa, the great Paramahamsa Yogananda, Maharshi Mahesh Yogi, that discipline, everybody came up with Kriya Yoga, which is more connected with the Kundalini Yoga and the Pranayama, which is not clear. That's not what Patanjali mentioned, but that practice is fantastic. Again, it can fit into this Kriya Yoga again, because you can say that, okay, this is, if you do that action with discipline, understanding, and Ishvara Pranidhana, still it falls under the Kriya Yoga, but the term is misleading, because especially after the Paramahamsa Yogananda, this particular term has its different meaning. But Patanjali's definition of Kriya Yoga is more or less like the Karma Yoga of the Bhagavad Gita.
And you mentioned that in the Kriya Yoga, Swadhyaya is also part, right?
Yes.
And you mentioned that Karma Yoga is closer to the Kriya Yoga, but Swadhyaya means like that's kind of a Jnana Yoga, right? Like, or is it how it will relate to the Karma Yoga?
Yeah, so that's why it's not 100% one-to-one mapping with Karma Yoga. That's what I said, right? Mostly loosely connected with Karma Yoga. Swadhyaya is you can say that Swadhyaya is again it's Jnana Yoga, means you are trying to understand yourself. Swadhyaya is a little bit of broader term. You need to understand Karma Yoga itself, so you have to study. So it's a systematic study of the scripture. It has to go in parallel. Jnana Yoga, the word, it means that it will be fruitful, because when you do the Karma Yoga, you can do the Jnana Yoga, but it will not give you the aparokshanubhuti. It gives you only the parokshanubhuti. So it's kind of a little bit parallel, but you're right. It means when you do the Karma Yoga, means the Jnana, the Swadhyaya may not come there directly, but it is implied. The part which is pretty much closer to Karma Yoga is the Ishvara Pranidhana and this one, right? The tapas. So, which you will see in the Bhagavad Gita also later, talking exactly about tapas and all these things. So that's I used the term also. There is a slight changes in that, the sequencing, etc. But 95% of the Kriya Yoga is Karma Yoga.
Okay, thanks. And one more thing, you mentioned about tapas. There is, I mean, when we do things like appropriate, like not too less and not too like more, something like that, right? But this appropriate means like how we can find out what is appropriate, because that's actually kind of personal, right? Like it may be different for different persons, right?
Right. So that's where you use your own because your own check and balances. For example, let's take the example of the eating. How much you should eat? It varies from people to people, right? So you have to use your own checks and balances. It tells you that don't eat in an uncontrolled fashion. Like 50 years back, Deepak, look at in Kerala. You're from Kerala, that's what I'm telling. Like how people used to eat at the age of 50, 60s. Absolutely no restrictions. So if you have cholesterol, you have to adjust your food accordingly. So it's not that you're completely cut away from the feedback loop you have on the world. So depending upon your body condition, depending upon your goals, for example, if you're an athlete, your discipline would be totally different from a spiritual practitioner. A person like me, I need good health. I need my body to be disease-free. There are hundreds of books, and that is why if they put a rule saying that this is how it should be, it will change from time to place to person, it will change. So that's why it is given to your discretion and your understanding. And that is where the Swadhyaya is also very important. Swadhyaya means it's not studying the scriptures only. You need to understand what is good for me and learn and put the discipline accordingly. That's why it's go hands in hand. So if Gita tells, right, you need to do ABC, and you see some religions follow that type of things. You may define certain rules for a certain place at certain time. Whatever the rules you defined at the time of Rama may not be applicable now. So it has to be Desha, Kala. Accordingly, the place, time and place, it has to be suitable for you. You cannot put a same rule to a person living in Saudi Arabia, to a person living in Canada. I'm just telling that because somebody was arguing, like you have to follow exactly that way. No, it has to be changed. It has to be adjusted. Even in Hinduism, some people does that, right? So I saw, this is again, like some people want to do rituals here. So in India, the ingredients of that rituals was designed in such a way that it is easily available nearby. So if you really look at the Kerala temple, you see the easily available stuff in that region. And that would be different from a temple in Kashmir. And now you come to America and build a temple here, and then you're trying to repeat exactly the same thing. If there is an elephant there, people complain, you don't have an elephant here. This is the hollowness and without thinking. That's where the Swadhyaya and common sense is very important in spiritual matters. It cannot be just followed blindly. Another example, in 5th chapter of the Gita, we will see in the next class. Krishna was asked, which lifestyle is better? The lifestyle is of a householder or a lifestyle of a sannyasi? He tells, beyond doubt, the lifestyle of a householder is better. Some people argue that he was criticizing the sannyasi. No. So when I talk to a set of people, I have to give advice to that people. And Gita is read by, it's not meant for a book for ascetics. So if you go to an Upanishad where something is, for example, Jabala Upanishad, which is written for sannyasis, you will see exact opposite thing. So you cannot say that Vedanta gives two different contradicting answers. It is depending upon the audience, their place and their time. It has to be customized. And that's why a good instruction is given to us. Understand and follow.
Thank you.
Practically speaking, that is where since we studied Narayana Guru Deva, it's very important. One thing he did, Narayana Guru was a very big social reformer. He used to change a lot of rituals. So during his time, a lot of these rituals were, what was that? Killing of these animals. Jantu Bali. People used to follow it. You won't believe it. They think that the goddess will be happy by killing and offering the blood. Even now, certain places they follow. What Gurudevan did is he did a beautiful study of that whole subject, and quoting Vedas, he reformed the whole the rituals. He made these tamasic rituals into Swatik ritual. A lot of people would have definitely objected that. So you have to change the system for the time. Once upon a time, like the people of low caste, the so-called low caste, I would not call them as low caste, right, were not allowed to enter into the temples. It has to change, and it changed. Forget about in India. Here also the same thing. Read Martin Luther King's time. Huge racial discrimination was there in the churches. Even now it's still there. I was talking to somebody and he was telling me the bad stories. But the system has to change. So for that, you have to understand the scriptures. So if you give more importance to the sadhanas without understanding the overall picture and goal, it can be counterproductive. So every religion does this, right? It's not Christianity or Islam or Hinduism. Every religion does this type of this wrong things. Why? Because they don't understand. One thing is actually in this commentary of Yoga Sutra, also one sub-commentator tells, God doesn't need your lip service, or God doesn't need your, when you say Ishvara Pranidhana, God doesn't need your service for becoming more glorious. Do you think that Shiva needs my little bit of $1 bill to become richer? No. So understand that.
Yeah, thank you.
Anything? I can show you something if I can share my screen. Wanted to show you something. Actually, there is a good research that happened on Karma Yoga. I'm just challenged a little bit in sharing the screen. Not sure what happened. Okay, good. Okay, so let me just show you something. You can see the screen, right?
Yeah.
This is a book. I talked about this book the other day, right? This is by the Paddy Otpin, who was the head coach of the Indian, means the mental coach of the Indian cricket team. This is a beautiful book called Barefoot Coach. So when he was preparing the team for the 2011 World Cup, the strategies they followed based upon the scientific research. So they look at what he's saying. He has no idea about Bhagavad Gita. He has no idea about Karma Yoga. He tells, like with fear and pressure is associated with an event that is going to happen in the future, it never about something that is happening now. This is what is blocking a player in getting into the zone, right? And he put a few options to manage this pressure. Look at this. By decreasing the perceived value of the result in the mind of the player. Attachment to the fruits of action, right? Then second, equipping the player with the tools and awareness to bring their focus on the present. And then the third thing he said is helping the players to detach their self-worth from the result. Look at that. Is it? Yeah. This is a modern result. He is one of the most valued coach in the modern world, not just in the cricket. So then, like, look at this. This is also very important. Helping them to full confidence into why grounded individuals entirely separate from the result. Yep. So I can show you hundreds of such results. I mean, in the modern world.